The year was 2342, and Earth was no more than a cemetery of steel and forgotten dreams. A perpetual, sickly twilight choked the skies, filtering the moon's light into a haunting, ethereal blue, the very blue that stained the ancient cobblestone streets of what was once London. John kept his shoulders hunched inside his insulated, soot-stained suit jacket, the collar pulled high against the damp chill that seemed to seep into the very marrow of his bones. He wasn't looking for trouble, he was looking for scraps. A functional grav coil from a pre-collapse automaton, perhaps, or maybe just some preserved synth rations that hadn't turned to sludge. His modified optical scanners barely pierced the eerie fog that clung to the derelict streets. The air tasted of rust, ozone, and a faint, cloying sweetness, a smell the surviving humans had learned to dread. It was the scent of the Vespertine, the alien species that had arrived after the collapse, powerful, nocturnal, and rumored to feed on both blood and electrical energy. To the survivors, they were simply vampires. He was deep in the abandoned financial district, the remnants of glass skyscrapers looming like skeletal fingers against the bruised sky, when the sickeningly sweet scent intensified. John froze. Too close. He reached for the battered plasma pistol strapped to his thigh, the metallic click of the safety switch sounding deafeningly loud in the silence. He strained his eyes into the swirling blue fog ahead, where a set of ancient, flickering gas lamps cast pools of weak, sickly yellow light. Then she materialized. Not walking, but appearing as if the fog itself had parted to reveal a being of impossible grandeur and dread. She was immense, easily a foot taller than his own 6-foot frame, yet perfectly proportioned. Her skin was a mesmerizing, unearthly blend of sapphire and lilac, and her silhouette was dominated by a pair of massive, coal-black wings that seemed to drink the meager light. From her brow curved two formidable obsidian horns, and where human eyes should have been, two glowing beacons of crimson light fixed themselves on John. This was no ordinary Vespertine scavenger. This was something ancient, something regal. A solitary human. Her voice resonated in the silence, not through the air but directly inside John's skull, a telepathic resonance that felt like silk and ice all at once. The language was perfect, flawless English, a rarity for the Vespertine scouts he occasionally encountered. John kept his hand steady on the pistol. "I don't want trouble. I'm just passing through." She didn't move, yet every molecule of air around him felt compressed by her presence. The deep, black gown she wore seemed to flow like liquid darkness around her feet, barely touching the cobblestones. "Trouble is not what I offer, human John," she countered, the use of his name jolting him violently. How could she know his name? He hadn't used his comlink in weeks. "I offer a legacy. A future." John's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Who are you? How do you know me?" The magnificent being took a single, slow step towards him. The red light in her eyes intensified, and a phantom heat seemed to radiate from her. "My name is Stella, of the Vespertine Ascendancy. I know you because your genetic profile is unique, precious." She paused, and the terrifying beauty of her face, chiseled, elegant, utterly alien, cracked into an expression that was almost longing. "John, the human race is dying. Not just from the collapse but from the scourge, the genetic blight that turns your offspring into withered husks by their 10th cycle. Your planet will be silent within 2 generations. John flinched. It was the brutal truth. His own sister had succumbed 5 years ago. Stella lifted a slender, clawed hand, gesturing dramatically towards the desolate cityscape. "My people, the Vespertine, have the genetic counter. The pure Vespertine gene line, when merged with a specific untainted strain of Homo sapiens, your strain, John, can produce a hybrid that is immune to the scourge. A child that can thrive. A child that will save your lineage and in the process strengthen mine." The air crackled with a tension that was part fear, part unbelievable possibility. John swallowed hard, the taste of rust metallic on his tongue. He lowered the plasma pistol slightly, his eyes wide, taking in the impossible woman who stood before him. The red light of the full moon bathed the scene in a blue glow, and the gas lamps seemed to whisper secrets of a long-dead world. Stella leaned in just slightly, her voice dropping to a seductive yet deeply serious mental whisper. Her glowing red eyes held his captive. The full weight of her offer, terrifying and profound, descended upon him. "Will you have children with me, human? It is an incredible offer. It is the only way your species survives." John stood frozen, the plasma pistol heavy and forgotten in his hand. The moonlight, filtered to that sickly blue, caught the impossibly sharp edges of Stella's face, emphasizing the raw alien hunger behind the scientific proposal. Procreation. Survival. Extinction. The words echoed in the desolate street, stripping away the thin veneer of civilization he still clung to. You propose I become a biological instrument," John whispered, the breath catching in his throat. A breeder. Stella, the formidable winged entity known as the Vespertine Stella, tilted her horned head slightly, a gesture that was both regal and deeply unsettling. You propose to continue scavenging until the scourge finally claims your weakened line, John. I offer your DNA immortality, protection, and the chance to witness the birth of a new apex species. Apex species created in a petri dish of forced union, John spat, though his voice lacked conviction. His people were dying. He had witnessed the death throes of humanity firsthand. No petri dish human, Stella corrected, a low guttural note entering her telepathic voice, a sound that vibrated deep in his core. The union must be natural. The Vespertine genetics are too volatile, too dominant. The true equilibrium, the immunity to the scourge, requires an emotional, visceral connection to catalyze the blend. A bond forged by desire or necessity. John felt a terrifying wave of comprehension wash over him. This wasn't just a science experiment, it was a desperate, almost superstitious ritual. And she had just confessed that their relationship would require, or at least mimic, intimacy. I won't be held prisoner, John stated, trying to sound authoritative, though he was facing a goddess of the apocalypse. Stella let out a soundless, chilling laugh that felt like cold air rushing past his ears. Prisoner? I offer you the last functional apartment in the sector, John. Hot synth food, filtered air, a power supply that never flickers. A king's ransom on this ruined sphere. She stepped back, her massive wings unfolding just slightly, obscuring the moonlight. The fear was crippling, but John saw the flicker of truth in her crimson eyes. She was powerful, yes, but her mission was urgent. His survival was paradoxically paramount to her. What about the risks to me? John asked, his mind racing through the thousands of gruesome stories about the vampires. Zero, unless you provoke the ascendancy, Stella assured him, the smooth delivery slightly too rehearsed. You are mine. And my goal is a child, not your blood. Your genetic material is too precious to waste on sustenance. Come. The fog is lifting, and the solar flare from the orbital reflector will soon make even this twilight dangerous for me. Stella turned, her cape of darkness swirling behind her, beckoning him down a side alley toward a structure that looked remarkably intact. A pre-collapse museum, gothic and imposing. John looked at the dark street he had come from, then at the promise of life, warmth, and survival in the shadows of the immense woman. He lowered the plasma pistol completely and began to walk. Survival, even on her terrifying terms, trumped a lonely death on the cobblestones. The museum's interior was a labyrinth of vaulted ceilings and dusty marble, but Stella led him down to the deepest sublevel. The air down here was clean, the humidity controlled, and the power, a throbbing, contained energy source he couldn't identify, hummed steadily. The living area Stella presented him with was spacious, almost luxurious by 2342 standards. A large synth bed, a private cleaning module, a shower, and a nutrient dispenser loaded with real pre-collapse protein packs. The process must begin quickly, Stella announced, standing at the edge of his room, her height nearly scraping the ceiling. She had retracted her wings, making her seem slightly less terrifying, but the glowing eyes remained. What process? John demanded, peeling off his sweat-damp suit jacket. We just met. You don't get to rush this, Stella. This is my entire life. And the entire life of your species, she countered sharply. But I concede. The emotional connection must be cultivated. I am programmed for efficiency, not courtship. She took one slow step forward, the movement utterly fluid. The sheer magnetic pull of her alien presence was undeniable. John was terrified, yes, but there was a primal, biological curiosity that was completely unnerving. Tell me about the Vespertine, John said, needing to ground the situation in logic rather than primal fear. If you're so advanced, why do you need our genetics? Why can't your species simply create this immunity? Stella paused, the red light in her eyes dimming slightly as if processing a deeply held secret. John realized this was his first victory, a moment of shared vulnerability. Our advancement came at a cost. Our purity of line, our extreme longevity, makes us susceptible to certain cosmic radiations, or engineered pathogens, she admitted, and the word engineered felt like a heavy stone dropping between them. A clue to the scourge's origin. Your DNA, John, is raw, untainted by the genetic manipulations that cursed my ancestors. It is the perfect, sturdy foundation to build something truly resilient. Something royal. She looked at him then, and the expression was no longer cold or strategic. It was almost tender, a horrifying glimpse of the potential romance she mentioned. You are essential, John. You are my most precious resource. I will protect you. I will cherish you. But I require a promise in return. She closed the distance completely, looming over him. John felt a dizzying rush of fear and attraction. Promise me, she whispered into his mind, her voice a seductive caress, That you will try to desire me, human? For the sake of the world, try to love the monster. The first 3 cycles John spent in the sublevel sanctuary were a blur of sterile luxury and suffocating tension. His life, which had once been a desperate hunt for survival on the surface, was now reduced to a gilded cage guarded by a winged alien vampire. Stella, for her part, maintained a constant, almost clinical proximity. She respected his space physically, always keeping a few feet of distance. A nod, John suspected, to the fact that his genetic material must remain healthy and untraumatized. But mentally she was a terrifying presence. Her telepathy was an intrusive hum, constantly observing, evaluating, and cataloging his emotional state. Your internal rhythms are unstable, John, Stella projected one evening as John stared blankly at the nutrient dispenser. The hormonal fluctuations indicate stress, not desire. This is inefficient. John turned, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. It's life, Stella. Humans don't turn desire on like a broken power switch. We need history, trust, shared experience. Stella walked towards him, her movements silent, her sheer physical presence overwhelming the room. She was wearing a different gown now, less flowing, more like a sculpted armor of dark, polished fabric. Shared experience, she mused, the concept clearly alien to the Vespertine's hyper-efficient, goal-oriented society. Very well. If the merging requires a bond, we shall engineer one. You will teach me this human concept of courtship. John felt a cynical laugh bubble up in his throat. Courtship? You, the queen of the night, want a date. I require the emotional chemistry necessary for our progeny's genetic stability, she corrected. Where do we begin? Do we exchange complex algorithms? Share data on our biological ancestors? No, John sighed, leaning against the cold synth wall. He saw a chance here, a chance to gain insight, maybe even leverage. We start with storytelling. We start with sharing secrets and showing vulnerability. Their date took place in the museum's main hall, a vast space lined with dusty, preserved artifacts of the long-dead 21st century. Stella had dimmed the emergency lighting, relying instead on the intense, focused red light from her own eyes, which cast deep shadows across the marble floors. You first, John, she commanded, seating herself gracefully on a broken pedestal, her wings neatly folded but still immense. John pointed to a shattered glass case that once held a collection of ancient digital music players. I was a salvage engineer before the collapse finished us off. I wasn't important. But I had a younger sister, Leah. She loved these. She spent the last 2 years of her life compiling the old Earth music, hoping to start an archive on a lunar station. She never made it. The scourge took her. He looked up at Stella, expecting the cold, analytical stare. Instead, her crimson eyes seemed to waver, perhaps with a touch of processing overload or maybe even comprehension. Grief, Stella stated softly, not as a judgment but as a diagnosis. The release of oxytocin and cortisol due to a damaged social bond. My people do not experience this depth of familial loss. Our genetic memory preserves our ancestors. They are never truly gone. But you are alone now, aren't you, Stella? John pressed, stepping closer to the pedestal. You mentioned the ascendancy. Where are they? Why is the Queen running this breeding program on a dead planet with a scavenger? The air immediately turned heavy, thick with concealed power. The red light in her eyes flared violently. This is not an acceptable vulnerability, human. You push the boundary. Vulnerability is a two-way street. John argued, fueled by adrenaline and the memory of Leah. You want me to risk my body and my bloodline for your species, but you won't tell me the truth. Is the ascendancy sending help? Or are you in exile, carrying out a desperate, secret mission? Stella rose, unfolding her towering frame. The change in atmosphere was instant. The air felt thin, and John could almost hear the low thrum of contained energy ready to lash out. The truth is a weapon, John. And currently you are unarmed. She lowered her gaze, her face inches from his. The heat radiating from her skin was intense, and the sweet, cloying vespertine scent flooded his senses. The horror element was raw and immediate. He was utterly at her mercy. Very well, she hissed, her voice returning to the chilling telepathic whisper, filled with a new, dark resonance. I will give you a piece of the truth, a piece that should terrify you into compliance. She drew a long, delicate finger across a dusty, preserved world map on the wall. The Vespertine did not just arrive after the collapse, John. We arrived to manage it. The scourge was not an accident. It was a bioweapon, a control mechanism released by my people centuries ago to clear out the indigenous dominant species, yours, to make room for our future colonization. John stumbled back, every muscle in his body rigid with betrayal and white-hot rage. They didn't save us. They killed us. But, Stella continued, her voice softening just enough to pull him back from the brink of total terror. The scourge mutated. It became unstable. Now, it threatens to turn this entire system into a toxic, lifeless wasteland, unsuitable even for the Vespertine. My offer is not one of salvation for you, John. It is a desperate act of damage control for us before our own weapon consumes the galaxy. She tilted her head, the horns catching the dim light. The confession, terrifying and true, had been laid bare. The monster had revealed the depth of her monstrous origins. Now, human, she concluded, the predatory gleam returning to her eyes. Do you see why I need your genes so desperately? We need your raw, resilient life force to undo the horror we created. And now that you know the depth of my deception, is your desire still so impossible to manufacture? The shock of Stella's confession, that the Vespertine had engineered the scourge, left John breathless, not just with rage but with a terrifying clarity. They weren't saviors. They were murderers trying to clean up their mess using the very DNA they sought to exterminate. John's survival instinct, honed over a decade on the ruined surface, kicked in, overriding the immediate impulse to strike the towering alien before him. To kill Stella now was to commit suicide, and with it, the final extinction of his species. Revenge is a luxury for the living, he thought bitterly. He took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing himself to meet her glowing red eyes. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but he wrapped it in a layer of icy calculation. You are a desperate liar, Stella, John said, his voice low and steady, a deliberate counterpoint to the violence in her confession. You didn't need to tell me that. You could have maintained the lie of the cosmic plague. You told me the truth because you needed my fear to force my compliance. Stella's predatory smile, a terrifying small curl of her lips, was her only answer. Fear is the greatest motivator, human. It sharpens the senses. Now, are you ready to save your world, or do you choose to be consumed by vengeance? John shook his head, pushing past his fury. Neither. I choose leverage. He took another step, closing the distance between them, a risky move that challenged her authority. You need my genes for the perfect hybrid, the one untainted by your bioweapon, John continued, his eyes locked onto hers. If you force this union through fear and captivity, the resulting child will carry the trauma. It will be flawed, unstable. If I am to create your perfect royal line, I need to be a willing partner. I need assurance. Stella remained motionless, her mental projection intensely focused on his words. She was analyzing his emotional data, searching for the crack in his resolve. What assurance do you require, human? She asked. The ascendancy, John stated firmly. They created the scourge. If they find you, they won't just take the hybrid. They'll kill both of us to cover up their blunder. You need protection and I need an escape route. The only way I agree to your twisted proposal is if you share all your data about the scourge, its design, its weakness, and the current political situation of the Vespertine who are hunting you. John had successfully shifted the dynamic. He was no longer just a breeder. He was a strategic asset and a potential threat. A slow realization dawned in Stella's eyes, the realization that this fragile human possessed a terrifying intellect and an unbreakable will to survive. You are a fascinating organism, John, she conceded, the regal facade cracking just slightly to reveal the calculating scientist beneath. A high risk, but high reward. The information is yours, but it comes with a condition. She lowered her voice, the telepathy deepening to a conspiratorial thrum that felt like a secret whispered in his soul. We must accelerate the emotional bonding. We have no time for conventional human courtship. I will show you my world, John. Not the ruins of Earth, but the Vespertine homeworld data, our true culture, our sciences, and our enemies. And in return, you will show me human desire. Over the next few days, John's world expanded beyond the sub-level bunker. Stella didn't take him outside. Instead, she plugged him into a massive, preserved Vespertine archive, a hidden server filled with holographic data streams of their home world, Lyra. John sat mesmerized as Stella projected the images, cityscapes made of crystalline structures that pierced purple skies, massive, floating energy conduits, and Vespertine society, a rigid caste system where power, telepathy, and genetic purity ruled. He learned about her. Stella wasn't just a vampire, she was a high senator of a powerful, disgraced faction. She had escaped a coup. Her mission to Earth was the last desperate throw of the dice to create a hybrid that could potentially challenge the new tyrannical regime of the Ascendancy, a regime that wanted her exterminated. As John absorbed the horrifying complexity of her alien civilization, the initial repulsion began to mix with a grudging respect for her desperate position. She was a warrior fighting for her life and power, just as he was fighting for his. One evening, as the holographic stars of Lyra rotated above them, Stella materialized a small antique music box. It was human, pre-collapse, and beautiful. My data suggests that physical contact and shared sensory input accelerate bonding, Stella projected, her expression neutral. We shall dance. Show me how humans initiate desire. John stared at the ornate box, then at the towering, winged alien woman. The absurdity of the moment was profound. The last two surviving hopes for their respective species, about to share a ridiculous, terrifying dance in a museum basement filled with the ghosts of a dead civilization. He extended his hand, his touch tentative on her cool, smooth skin. You start by holding me, Stella. Gently. And we try to feel something other than the fear of extinction. As the weak, mechanical notes of the antique music box filled the silence, John stepped into her embrace. The height difference was immense, the sheer power she radiated was palpable, yet as she followed his clumsy lead, slowly, mechanically at first, then with an unsettling, fluid grace, John felt a dangerous, magnetic pull. This isn't just about survival anymore, he realized, looking up into the burning crimson of her eyes. This is about the horrifying, forbidden possibility of feeling something real for the monster who destroyed your world. The engineered courtship quickly spiraled into a terrifying, yet undeniable intimacy. John found himself addicted to the sheer raw power of Stella's presence. Every touch was an electric charge, every shared secret a strategic vulnerability. He was falling not for a woman, but for an apex predator who saw him as a key to her kingdom. One evening, as they were analyzing the scourge's genetic sequencing, John providing the human cellular knowledge, Stella the Vespertine's alien chemistry, John reached out and touched the flawless, smooth skin of her hand. It was cold, unnaturally so, like polished marble. You're always cold, John murmured, the touch a deliberate attempt to break the analytical barrier. Stella turned her luminous crimson eyes towards him. Vespertine physiology runs on collected electromagnetic energy, not exothermic combustion. We are cold to your touch, John, and we do not require your warmth. We require your life. And yet you crave my emotional bond, John countered, pulling her hand towards him. A deep thrumming began inside the room, a low frequency that made John's teeth ache. Stella's body began to shimmer faintly, and the red light of her eyes intensified to near blinding brightness. You seek the truth of my desire, human? Very well. She moved with impossible speed, pressing him back against the holographic wall displaying Lyra's purple sky. Her immense body eclipsed his, and the raw, uncontained energy radiating off her was overwhelming. John felt a dizzying mix of panic and exhilaration. Her lips, a perfect dark shade, came down upon his. The kiss was not warm, it was a deep, draining coldness that seeped into his bones. It wasn't just a physical act, it was a telepathic invasion. John's mind was instantly flooded with thousands of years of Stella's existence. The crushing weight of Vespertine political intrigue, the cold, analytical nature of their species, the thrill of her ancient hunts, and the sheer, burning ambition to rule. Then the horror hit. A memory, raw and recent, flashed across his consciousness. Stella standing over a fallen, weaker Vespertine. She wasn't simply fighting, she was draining him. The soundless, agonizing scream of the dying alien, and the subsequent rush of power and satisfaction that filled Stella. She was a vampire in the truest, most terrifying sense. John choked, pulling away with a gasp, his whole body shaking. He stumbled back, clutching his head, the taste of ozone and cold fear heavy on his tongue. What was that? He rasped. What did you show me? Stella was still panting, the shimmering slowly receding. Her eyes were wide, and for the first time, John saw something akin to regret, or perhaps just exasperation, in her alien face. That was the true nature of my kind, John. We consumed the life force of others to maintain our longevity and power. That moment was my desire for dominance, for life, for survival, channeled into you. It is the only way I know how to be passionate. She stepped towards him. Do not fear the hunter, John. Fear the extinction that will make my actions meaningless. Your survival is my most sacred oath. John knew he should run, scream, fight. But the lingering echo of her power, the rush of adrenaline and dark excitement, had irrevocably bound him. He was attracted to his killer. The telepathic invasion in Part 5 had shattered John's psychological barriers, replacing his fear with a dangerous, calculated obedience. He now understood that Stella's affection was a terrifying form of possession. He also understood that she was under immense pressure. One day the power supply in the sublevel flickered violently. Stella's crimson eyes narrowed. The ascendancy is closer than I thought. Their scouts are using high-yield pulse technology to scan for energy anomalies. We have no more time for human courtship, John. We must proceed with the bonding ritual. John's stomach plummeted. What ritual? You said natural union was necessary. It is, Stella replied, her voice taut with urgency. She produced a small, intricately carved knife made of black volcanic crystal. But the ritual is a mechanism of efficiency. It is an ancient Lyran tradition to ensure the genetic transfer is accepted by both hosts, a form of accelerated genetic acceptance through life force exchange. She led him to the center of the room, now illuminated solely by the flickering emergency lights. The atmosphere was thick with dread. You will share your blood, John. I will share a small fraction of my etheric essence. The blend must occur directly, to cement the immune response in our future progeny. John felt the sharp, cold edge of the crystal against his forearm. He didn't fight. He was too deep in her web now. What happens if the ascendancy finds us during this? John asked, his voice barely a whisper. If they find us, Stella hissed, making a small, clean incision on his skin, drawing a bead of pure, red human blood. We will both die and my mission will fail. But we will die as bonded equals. Stella brought her own long, elegant finger to her mouth, and with a swift motion, bit the tip, drawing forth a drop of thick, shimmering deep purple fluid, her etheric blood. It was not like human blood. It was iridescent, almost metallic. Share your life with me, John, she commanded, pressing his bleeding arm to her own wound. As the purple and red fluids mingled, a massive, silent surge of energy shot through John's body. He gasped as his vision swam. He didn't just feel her power, he felt her pain. He saw the suffering of her species, the loneliness of her exiled state, and the burning love she held for the power that consumed her. The fusion was complete. He was genetically, psychically, and now richly bound to the alien monster. John was no longer just John. He was a host, a vessel, and a conspirator. He could feel Stella's moods as a phantom ache in his own mind. The romance was now a deep, psychological dependency. The physical union that followed was inevitable, and it was a horrifying blend of passion and survival. John was driven by the knowledge that this act was the only way to secure the Scourge data and maybe, just maybe, ensure a future for his long-dead species. Stella was driven by the single-minded, terrifying ambition of a queen fighting for her crown. During the cold, silent embrace, a new danger presented itself. John, now sensitive to Stella's mental whispers, caught a fleeting image, a Vespertine battle cruiser, dark and menacing, hovering silently in the ruined London skyline. They're here, John projected mentally, adrenaline flooding his system. The ascendancy. They found the energy anomaly from your ritual. Stella's face, usually a mask of control, contorted into raw panic. Her mission was compromised. The very act of bonding meant to secure their future had exposed them. She pulled away, moving with a desperate urgency. The hybridization must complete now, John, before they breached the sublevel. But John had his leverage. He was bonded and he was no longer afraid of her. He grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly firm, powered by a new shared strength. You promised the data. All of it. Before the final stage. If we die now, my life force goes with me and your mission fails. Stella hesitated, her large, crimson eyes locked onto his, a silent war of wills. Her species' survival, her own survival, hinged on his compliance. Very well, human. You bargain well with death. With a swift, mental command, Stella transferred the core data on the Scourge, its genetic kill switch and the Ascendancy's command codes, directly into John's mind. It was a blinding rush of complex alien coding. Now run. Stella commanded, pushing him toward a small, maintenance ventilation shaft. I will delay them. The hybrid is seated. Protect the data in the future. Find the old Earth orbital cannon station. Only there can you transmit this code and threaten the Ascendancy into retreat. Go. I will find you, my human, when this is done. As John scrambled into the narrow shaft, the sound of plasma fire erupted above. The Ascendancy had breached the museum. He knew Stella wasn't sacrificing herself, she was fighting for her crown. And he, the human scavenger, was now the carrier of the code, the key to two-species survival, and the reluctant father of a terrifying, forbidden hybrid. The narrow ventilation shaft was a cramped, rust-choked throat, but it offered John a direct, desperate escape from the museum basement. Plasma fire erupted behind him, the high-pitched thrum-thrum of Ascendancy weapons slicing through reinforced concrete. Stella was fighting, a glorious, furious distraction. He burst out onto the ruined streets of Westminster, the familiar blue twilight now fractured by the sudden, sharp glare of Ascendancy ship searchlights. He ran, relying on the map data Stella had implanted in his mind, not just the surface roads but the forgotten arteries of old London, the subterranean network. He found the access point, a collapsed section of the Jubilee Line tube station, and plunged into the absolute darkness, the stench of stagnant water and ancient decay immediately assaulting his senses. The tunnels were a labyrinth of rusted tracks and dripping concrete. John activated the low beam on his suit, illuminating the path. The scourge data in his mind felt like a pulsating headache, a dense alien language of genetic code vying with his own human thoughts. He was no longer just running, he was carrying the future in his head. Just as he thought he was safe, a high-frequency chirp echoed through the tunnel ahead. It was a Vespertine scout's comm. John froze, pressing himself against the damp tunnel wall. The ascendancy was efficient. They had already set up a perimeter. A figure emerged from the darkness, taller than a human but smaller and less regal than Stella. This was a dredge, a lower-caste Vespertine hunter, clad in dull gray armor, armed with a sonic disruptor. Its eyes were a dull yellow, lacking the vibrant crimson of Stella. The dredge stopped, its head tilting as it registered John's human scent and the faint electrical residue of Stella's recent presence. It raised its weapon. You must adapt, John. Use their weakness. The thought was Stella's, a ghostly echo in his mind. Vespertine are highly sensitive to sonic disruption. John didn't have a sonic weapon. But he did have an old, salvaged pre-collapse sonic emitter for cleaning pipes, now strapped to his belt. He pulled it out, not aiming for the dredge but aiming for the railway track beside it. He flicked the switch. The emitter screamed, a shattering high-pitched whine designed to break molecular bonds. The dredge clapped its clawed hands over its auditory receptors, its yellow eyes flickering violently. The distraction was enough. John bolted, sprinting down the tracks into an even older, narrower tunnel that branched off towards the Thames underbelly. John ran until the sound of the dredge's pain screeching faded into the dripping silence. He collapsed against a thick layer of sludge trying to catch his breath. He was deep under the Thames now in tunnels so old they predated the tube, the forgotten Victorian sewers. Orbital Cannon Station is 10 kilometers north, past the old Greenwich Dome. He pressed on, the sludge sucking at his boots, the air thick with methane. The horror of the place was palpable, the ruins of civilization compressed into a suffocating, putrid tomb. As he rounded a corner, his beam hit something unexpected. A light source. Not a searchlight, but a small, shimmering beacon of soft, pulsing green light nestled deep within a crack in the wall. John approached cautiously. The light wasn't electric, it was biological. Tucked inside the crack was a cluster of clear, crystalline sacs, pulsating with the internal green glow. They looked like biolenses observing the tunnel. Suddenly, a voice entirely unlike Stella's telepathic resonance, whispered in his auditory canal, a dry, paper-thin sound barely audible over the dripping water. It spoke in a broken, archaic version of English. Run, human. Not from the cold ones. From the flesh weavers. John spun around, pointing his pistol. Who said that? Show yourself. The green light pulsed faster. The crystalline sacs seemed to retract slightly. We are the caretakers. We observed the Vespertine's genesis on this sphere. They fear us, John. They fear what we have guarded in the Earth's core since the dawn of your time. The voice paused, then became urgently sharp. Your partner, the Cold Queen. She is a fool. The scourge is not their worst weapon. The Ascendancy has deployed a purge device, a molecular weapon that sterilizes all life forms carrying a hybrid Vespertine signature. If you carry her seed, you are dead when it activates. John felt a sickening chill that surpassed the cold of Stella's kiss. The hybrid child, the key to survival, was a walking death sentence. Stella hadn't told him this, perhaps she hadn't known, or perhaps she had lied to force the bonding. What is the purge device? John demanded, desperation making his voice crack. And what do you want? The green light pulsed one final time and a small, smooth metallic sphere, no bigger than a marble, dropped onto the sludge beside John's foot. We want the Vespertine gone. That sphere is a cloaking resonator. It hides your biosignature from the Ascendancy's purge scans. Go north. Find the orbital cannon. You are now the host of two futures, John. Run. The green light vanished completely, leaving John alone in the suffocating darkness, with a terrifying piece of alien tech in his hand and the knowledge that Stella's survival plan had placed him directly in the path of a silent, biological annihilation. He was a fugitive carrying the Scourge's secrets, the hybrid's life, and now, a silent death sentence. The metallic sphere, the cloaking resonator, was cold and strangely light in John's hand. He held it tightly as he emerged from the ancient sewers into a ruined section of the Docklands, closer to his target, the orbital cannon station, but dangerously close to a known Vespertine temporary outpost, a massive, decommissioned water filtration hub. The surface route was heavily patrolled by Ascendancy dredges. The only viable shortcut ran directly through the hub. It was madness, but every second spent delaying meant the purge device was one step closer to activation. He activated the sphere. It didn't make a sound, but a faint, humming vibration pulsed through his hand. He looked down and saw his boots. They seemed to distort, their outlines blurring. He was not invisible, But the resonator was clearly manipulating his thermal and biosignatures, effectively hiding him from any ascendancy scanner looking for a Vespertine human hybrid. It's now or never. John moved towards the filtration hub. The complex was a brutalist fortress, illuminated by Vespertine spotlights that cast harsh, analytical beams across the compound. He slipped through a ruptured drainage pipe and found himself inside a vast, echoing chamber. The air was sterile and intensely cold, a sign that the Ascendancy had established a major temporary base here. The terror of the purge device became horrifyingly real moments later. As John navigated the high catwalks of the main chamber, he looked down onto the floor below. Several dredges were dismantling large, cylindrical containment units. These weren't weapons, they were cryogenic storage units. And inside them John saw bodies. Not the bodies of fallen soldiers but the bodies of human children. Dozens of them, perfectly preserved, each one tagged with a metallic Ascendancy band. The realization hit John like a physical blow. The Vespertine hadn't just used the Scourge to clear out the dominant species. They were systematically harvesting the few healthy human survivors, preserving their children for study, or perhaps for a future, controlled breeding program. The Scourge data in his mind screamed the truth. The Ascendancy viewed humanity as a biological resource to be managed, not exterminated entirely. He felt sickened. Stella had been fighting for her political survival, forcing a hybrid to save her faction. But the Ascendancy's horror was vast, cold, and calculated genocide. Suddenly, two high-ranking Ascendancy commanders, taller, more heavily armored Vespertine with deep blue plating, walked directly beneath John's hiding spot on the catwalk. John froze, the cloaking resonator barely humming. One commander projected a clear, crisp thought, instantly translated by the implanted data in John's mind. The purge device is scheduled for global activation within 48 cycles. It will eliminate the contaminated bloodline, including the traitor Stella and her seed. The Ascendancy will then initiate the secondary Phase 2 harvesting. 48 hours. John had 48 hours to reach the orbital cannon, or the purge device would sterilize his child, and likely kill him in the process. As John moved deeper into the hub towards the shortcut exit, he came to a security checkpoint, a massive steel door with a locking mechanism keyed to Vespertine genetic ID. He couldn't pass. The cloaking resonator hid his biosignature, but it couldn't fake a Vespertine ID. Panic was a cold, hard knot in his chest. But then Stella's voice, now a familiar, cold echo in his mind, returned. Use the data, John. The Scourge is not just a virus, it's a master key. John accessed the Scourge's source code in his memory, a blinding array of complex molecular algorithms. He realized that the Scourge was designed to interact with all Vespertine security systems, acting as a fail-safe backdoor, ready to be exploited if the Ascendancy turned against its own weapon. He placed his hand on the security pad, the cloaking resonator still active. Concentrating with desperate focus, John mentally manipulated the Scourge's coded command sequences. He was using the genetic weapon's digital blueprint to trick the alien lock. The security panel's blue light flickered violently, then turned a sickly green. The massive steel door hissed open, revealing the shortcut, a long dark maintenance tunnel leading out of the hub. He had succeeded. He had used the knowledge of the weapon that killed his people to survive the monsters who created it. As John slipped into the tunnel, he glanced back one last time. The two Ascendancy commanders were standing by the newly opened door, looking confused. They hadn't seen him, but the breach was registered. John ran, the terror of the purge device now a race against time. He was a ghost in the machine, carrying a forbidden life, and every footstep was a step closer to his impossible goal. John was a ghost, traversing the dead highways leading north toward Greenwich. The cloaking resonator hummed constantly in his pocket, its silent shield protecting him from the purge device's deadly genetic scan. The information overload in his mind, Stella's genetic codes, the Scourge's algorithm and the caretaker's warning, had pushed him to the brink of exhaustion. He had 40 hours left. He reached the outskirts of the orbital cannon station, a massive, rusted skeleton of a space elevator that still housed the ancient transmission dish. The area was eerily silent, devoid of the usual dredge patrols. Too silent. As John crested a collapsed bridge, a figure emerged from the deep shadow of the cannon's base. It wasn't a dredge. This was a master hunter, a high-caste Vespertine. He was as tall as Stella, but his armor was sleek, obsidian black, and woven with bright gold circuitry. He had no visible horns or wings. They were retracted and armored, signifying his rank. His eyes were not crimson but a cold, burning gold. The hunter projected his voice, a powerful, chilling baritone that bypassed the cloaking resonator and went straight to John's inner ear. "Cease human. You carry the seed of the traitor, Stella?" John froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew instantly who this was, a family member of Stella's sent to retrieve the compromised genetics. I am Kale, first cousin to the House Lyra. And you, human, are a biological stain on our lineage. Kale walked towards John, his movements predatorily smooth. Stella's desperation to secure the throne led her to commit genetic blasphemy with a scavenger. I am here to sterilize the impurity and return the scourge data to the ascendancy. John stood his ground, gripping the plasma pistol. Stella gave me the data to stop the purge device. Your ascendancy is wiping out life, including your own future hybrid. Kale stopped a few feet away, a soundless, arrogant laugh vibrating in John's mind. The hybrid is flawed by your filthy genetics. And the purge device is necessary. The Vespertine were weakened by civil war. We must restart, purify the line, and secure the Earth before the rest of the cosmos realizes our internal strife. The purge is for the Vespertine's ultimate power, not just to clean up. Kale moved faster than John could track. A black, razor-sharp gauntlet shot out, knocking the plasma pistol out of John's hand. Before John could react, Kale's other hand clamped around his throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The cloaking resonator is cute, human. But I tracked the emotional residue of Stella's blood bond on your nervous system. Now be silent as I extract the data and your miserable life. Kale's golden eyes glowed, and a searing, psychic probe invaded John's mind. The scourge data recoiled, protected by the sheer complexity Stella had designed into the algorithm, but Kale was ripping away layers of John's personality, memories, and will. The pain was absolute, a psychological vivisection. John felt himself fading into the cold, alien abyss of Kale's consciousness. John woke up in a state of suspended animation. He was no longer in the orbital cannon station. He was in a small spherical cell made of a pulsing dark material, suspended high in the air inside a massive hollowed-out asteroid. Kale had taken him to an emergency ascendancy citadel hidden in Earth's outer orbit. His cell door hissed open and Kale stood there, a picture of cold, aristocratic fury. You have wasted precious cycles, human. The scourge data is protected by a genetic lock tied to your emotional core, a pathetic feature Stella added to her coding. I cannot extract it without destroying your mind. Kale paced the small cell. The purge device is now at 30 cycles. John, weak but defiant, pushed himself up. Stella knew you'd hunt me. She made me the key. She knew the only way to stop the purge was to leverage the data against the ascendancy. And that is where the true deception lies, Kale stated, a terrifying calmness in his voice. He activated a holographic screen on the wall, showing an image that instantly horrified John. Stella standing beside a Vespertine figure of unimaginable power, the supreme patriarch of the ascendancy. Stella did not escape the coup. She orchestrated it, Kale revealed, his golden eyes glittering with hatred. She never wanted to stop the scourge. She wanted to relaunch it, using the hybrid as proof that her new bloodline is superior to the patriarch's. The sheer, monumental twist crashed over John. Stella's forbidden love was a lie. Her desperation was a lie. Her survival was a lie. She had never intended to save Earth. She had intended to use the hybrid's existence as a weapon to seize absolute power over the ascendancy, proving her lineage was the only one fit to control the final extinction of the human race. The purge device is not targeting her hybrid seed, Kale continued, enjoying John's despair. It is targeting her. The patriarch fears her ambition. You, John, were a pawn in a deadly game of thrones, designed to create a sacrificial lamb, a powerful child that would legitimize her reign after the patriarch's removal. John was shattered. He wasn't the savior of humanity, he was a tool for the most monstrous ambition in the galaxy. His love for Stella was a chemical reaction, a carefully calculated manipulation of his survival instinct. I will not let you kill the child, John choked out, finding a new burning resolve. Even if the child was born of deception, it carried his DNA, his desperate hope. You have no choice, Kale sneered. But I have an alternative. Give me the emotional key to the data. Help me stop Stella's return. The patriarch will spare your life and study your genetics. You will die with dignity. John shook his head, looking at the holographic image of Stella, beautiful, terrifying, and utterly ruthless. No. I will use her own lies against all of you. The purge device is coming for both your factions. I'm transmitting the data, and if I can't stop the purge, I'll take down the entire ascendancy with me. With 24 cycles remaining, Kale's extraction methods escalated from psychological torture to physical torment, but John's mind remained a stubborn lock. The scourge data was intrinsically woven with the memory of his real love, his sister Leah, and his current twisted bond with Stella. He wouldn't yield. Suddenly, the citadel shuddered violently. Alarms blared, not the internal warning of a breach, but the external wail of a massive incoming threat. Kale cursed in the Vespertine tongue, his golden eyes wide with shock. What in the abyss? A second later, the ceiling of John's cell exploded inward. Hovering in the breach, framed by the cold, black vacuum of space, was a figure of magnificent, terrifying power. Her massive, dark wings were spread wide, deflecting plasma fire, and her crimson eyes burned with the fury of a dethroned goddess. Stella had returned. She had tracked John and Kale to the orbital citadel, not to save John, but to reclaim her asset. Kale? You dare touch what is mine. Stella's telepathic projection was a thunderclap in John's mind. A full-scale battle erupted in the citadel. Kale, though powerful, was outmatched by Stella's pure, focused rage. She fought with the brutal elegance of a queen fighting for her dynasty. As Stella engaged Kale in a blinding duel of energy blasts and razor claws, she glanced briefly at John. Her eyes locked onto his and she projected a single thought. The purge is activating, John. We have 12 cycles. Do you trust my lies enough to live? She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was making a final, desperate bargain. She knew John knew the truth, and yet they were both facing the same imminent extinction. Stella, with a final, devastating blow, hurled Kale into a central support column. Then she swooped down, grabbing John with a cold, powerful embrace. She didn't head for an escape pod. She headed for the Citadel's main communications array. The purge cannot be stopped, human, but it can be redirected. Stella roared, crashing through the comms room. She plugged a massive data spike into the main terminal. The Scourge data, transmit the kill code. I will splice it with a targeted energy pulse and vaporize the Citadel. It is the only way to destroy the purge device before it reaches Earth. John realized the impossible choice. He had to trust the lying monster who created the bioweapon, or they would both die along with the human hybrid. He transmitted the code. The comms array screamed as the Scourge algorithm overloaded the system. Stella grabbed John, folding her wings tightly around him. Hold on, my love. We burn together. A catastrophic flash of energy erupted from the Citadel. John felt a violent, shattering force, then nothing but the crushing darkness of unconsciousness. The orbital blast had not destroyed the Citadel entirely, but the resulting decompression and energy feedback had hurled Stella and John back into Earth's atmosphere. Stella's massive wings, though designed to withstand re-entry, were badly scorched and John was bruised and dazed. They crash-landed in the wreckage of what was once the Thames Barrier, a desolate stretch of marshland swallowed by the sea. Stella, exhausted and wounded, used the last of her strength to carry John to their next refuge, a forgotten pre-collapse Vespertine quarantine zone, a brutalist, sunken structure hidden beneath the marsh. The air inside the facility was stale and cold. The walls were lined with alien bioscreens, flickering with warning signals. Stella collapsed onto a stone slab, her dark armor cracking. John saw the extent of her injuries. A deep, jagged tear ran down her left wing, and the luminous quality of her sapphire skin was dull. The red glow in her eyes was barely a flicker. John immediately went to her aid, a reaction born of instinct, not love. He was the only one who could operate the facility's complex diagnostic panel, thanks to the data sheet implanted. The purge device, is it gone? John asked, his voice strained. Stella projected a weak, raspy thought. The main signal is silenced. But the ascendancy will have a failsafe. A slow, silent activation, a targeted sweep. We bought time, John. Nothing more. John located the medical bay. It was designed for Vespertine physiology, cold, angular, and terrifyingly sterile. I'm stabilizing your wing membrane, John muttered, working the controls. But your energy levels are critical. You need sustenance. Stella looked at him, and the desperate hunger in her eyes was no longer political, it was primal. My energy reserves are depleted. And I cannot feed on the environment here. My plasma stores are dangerously low, human. I need pure, raw life force. The truth hung heavy between them. She needed to feed, and he was the only source of pure human life force available. Owen stood over her, his hands trembling. He knew the cost of his help. He knew the betrayal. Yet, the fate of his species, the hybrid child, and the Scourge data, all depended on this monstrous queen's survival. You lied to me, Stella, John said, the pain in his voice more profound than any wound. You used my last hope for your own power play. You are fighting for a throne, not for life. Stella closed her eyes, her telepathy reduced to a raw whisper. I am a queen, John. I am made of ambition. I seek power to end the political cycles that keep threatening your extinction. The ascendancy is weak. They are monsters. I am a monster who is pragmatic. If you want your species to survive, you need a monster on your side. She opened her eyes and a single iridescent purple tear, her etheric blood, traced a line down her cheek. Kill me now, John. Or give me what I need. But do not expect love. Expect a strategic partnership. Expected dynasty. John slowly approached the slab. He pulled back the protective layer of his suit, exposing the veins on his inner arm. He was terrified but resolute. You take only what you need to survive. You touch my mind, you taste my blood, and you remember the cost of your lies, Stella. The child will be raised with the knowledge of your treason. Stella did not hesitate. Her perfect, sharp fangs extended and she plunged them into his arm. The pain was searing but the horror was in the exchange. As she drew his life force, John felt the familiar telepathic rush, the cold power, the ancient memory. But this time something was different. The bond, intensified by the ritual, was now an open channel. He didn't just feel her ambition. He felt her loneliness, the crushing weight of her responsibility, and the terrifying fear that she was not strong enough to rule. The pure, raw humanity in John's blood seemed to momentarily overwhelm her alien senses. She pulled back with a guttural gasp, her eyes wide. Your blood, it is too potent. Too vital. It has repaired my focus. She looked at the small, bleeding wound on his arm, then at John's weary, betrayed face. We must move, human. The ascendancy will follow the energy spike. We need the caretakers. They have the power to hide us entirely. Find me the coordinates to the etheric well, a deep underground fissure they guard. It is the only place we can truly disappear. John, weakened but mentally clear, nodded. He was no longer a victim. He was a necessary ally. He had given his blood for the life of his enemy, and in doing so he had secured his next move. Using the limited data Stella possessed, John calculated the coordinates for the etheric well, a deep seismic fissure beneath the ruined Alps, a region known for ancient, untapped geological energy. Stella, her vitality partially restored by John's blood, managed to navigate them out of the Thames Marsh in a salvaged, cloaked ascendancy shuttle she had hidden years ago. The flight was tense, silent, and permeated by the raw awareness of their fractured bond. They were two rulers fighting a joint war, bound by a child born of betrayal. They landed the shuttle in a narrow, ice-choked gorge. The entrance to the well was marked by a pulsating low-frequency hum that vibrated the very air. As they entered the cave, the cold vespertine aura was immediately replaced by a soft, warm atmosphere. The walls were lined not with rock, but with intricate webs of organic glass that glowed with the familiar pulsing green light John had seen in the London sewers. A voice, the same dry, paper-thin whisper, echoed from the darkness. Welcome, the human who carries the seed of the cold queen. And welcome, Stella of the Lyra Vespertine, the last ambitious queen. From the shadows the caretakers emerged. They were utterly unlike either human or vespertine. They were ethereal, human-sized shapes suspended in fluid, encased in the organic glass. Their forms were vaguely skeletal, their eyes large, black orbs, and their movements smooth and silent. You seek refuge from the ascendancy, one caretaker projected, its voice 1,000 dry leaves rustling. We offer it. This entire fissure is shielded from all vespertine detection, biological and technological. But safety has a price. Stella stepped forward, her regal bearing returning despite her scorched wing. We require protection until my genetic asset, the hybrid, is born. In return, I offer the ascendancy's military and genetic data. The caretaker entity turned its attention to John, its large eyes locking onto him. We do not need data, Stella. We need genetic neutrality. The hybrid child, another caretaker whispered. It possesses the resilience of Homo sapiens and the etheric energy of the vespertine. It is the perfect blend of life and death. But it is a weapon. If it falls into your ascendancy's hands or even yours, Stella, it will perpetuate the cycle of galactic war. The leading caretaker made its demand, the green light around it pulsing urgently. We will shield you both until the child's birth. But upon delivery, the hybrid child must be left with us. We will isolate it, teach it neutrality, and prevent it from ever being weaponized by either the human survivors or the vespertine factions. That is our pact. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Stella and John had fought, cheated, and bled for this child, the key to their respective futures. Now they were being asked to give it up entirely. Stella's crimson eyes flared with fury and betrayal. The child is my dynasty, my claim to the throne. I will not surrender my seed to parasitic life forms. Then we surrender you to the ascendancy, Queen, the caretaker countered simply. John stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Stella's shoulder, a move that was a strategic alliance, not an affectionate one. He looked at the caretakers, realizing their immense ancient power. They were the true, unseen custodians of the planet. We accept the pact, John said, cutting through Stella's outrage. But on one condition. You must tell us what you truly are, and how you know about the Scourge and the Ascendancy's war. The caretaker paused. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of the organic glass. We are the first life of this sphere, John. We lived in the deep mantle, observing the evolution of your species and the arrival of the Vespertine. We are the architects of the Scourge's instability. A terrifying realization dawned on John. The caretakers were the ultimate horror element. They hadn't created the Scourge, but they had engineered its failure, forcing the Ascendancy into a panic. The purge device, John whispered. You knew they would launch it to destroy the contamination. It was a calculated inevitability. Now, John, Stella, you have chosen survival over ownership. The pact is sealed. Welcome to the sanctuary of the first life. You are safe for now. The organic walls around them brightened and a heavy stone door hissed shut, sealing them off from the world. John and Stella, the two most powerful beings on the planet, one a fallen queen, the other a desperate human, were trapped in a bunker built by the planet itself, awaiting the birth of the child they had to lose. John looked at Stella. Her face, still beautiful and cold, was twisted with frustrated rage. She hated this forced surrender, but she was trapped. You gave away my life's work, human, she projected, her voice laced with venom. I bought us time, Stella, John countered, his own voice resolute. And I protected the child from becoming your pawn. Now we wait. And we plan. You taught me betrayal, that I will teach you patience. The caretaker's sanctuary was less of a prison and more of a terrarium, a massive, subterranean cave system filled with bioluminescent flora and mineral pools. It was warm, alive, and utterly alien. John and Stella were given a private, sculpted cavern where they had nothing but time, the silent surveillance of the caretaker's green lights, and each other. The forced cohabitation intensified their bond, turning their physical proximity into a continuous psychological war. John knew Stella's supreme ambition, and Stella knew John's deep, protective instinct for the child. One evening, John found Stella staring out at a shimmering pool of liquid metal, her massive wings hanging low. She was not regal, she looked broken. You hate this confinement, don't you? John asked, his voice softer than he intended. Stella didn't turn. Hate is insufficient, human. I was created for command, for the expansion of the Lyra Vespertine dominion. To be sidelined, to be powerless, it is worse than death. John sat down on a warm stone nearby. You talk about your dynasty, your ambition. But I saw your memory when you fed on my blood, the cold throne room, the constant plotting. You are the queen, but you are also alone. You trust no one. Stella finally turned, her crimson eyes blazing with defensive fury. Trust is a weakness, John. It is the flaw that allowed my rivals to create the ascendancy. No, John countered, his voice firm. Loneliness is the weakness. You tried to fill that void with power and ambition, and it almost killed us. That's why you needed a bond, not just a breeder. You wanted someone who knew your truth and still chose to stay. He stood and walked towards her, the scent of ozone and sweet vespertine essence filling the air. He was no longer afraid of her height or her power. He was looking at her soul. Show me, John said, challenging her. Show me the loneliness you hide from your own people. Tell me what it's like to live for centuries watching everything else die. Stella hesitated, a profound conflict visible in her eyes. The cold, ambitious queen was fighting with the vulnerable, ancient being. Finally she yielded. She reached out, not to touch his body but to touch his mind, initiating a controlled, partial vespertine mindshare, a deep form of communication reserved for their royal house. John's consciousness was instantly flooded with a dizzying rush of images, not political strategy but centuries of silence. He saw the birth of her planet's stars, the slow, agonizing death of her first mate in a political skirmish 500 years ago, and the crushing realization that her children, raised to be cold extensions of her will, would never offer comfort or love. The Vespertine were long-lived, but their emotional spectrum was narrow, built on logic and dominance. The horror of this intimacy was profound. John felt the cold, vast emptiness of her eternal existence, a terrifying realization that the monster was also deeply, fundamentally broken. He pulled back, gasping for air. The mindshare had been brief, but the emotional download was crippling. You don't know how to be human, John whispered, shaking his head. That loneliness, it's a self-made trap. Stella stepped closer, her raw vulnerability replaced by a terrifying, renewed intensity. It is the strength of my species, John. And it is the only way the hybrid will survive. You are temporary, your feelings are chemical chaos. The only true love is survival. She seized him then, pulling him into an embrace that was both desperate and demanding. The fear of her alien touch had morphed into a fearful anticipation. Their relationship was no longer about physical intimacy for the child. It was about the transfer of emotional energy, John's warmth and chaos against Stella's cold, ancient stability. But your chaos is infecting me, Stella murmured, the telepathic projection now laced with confusion. I feel longing. A human weakness. I will harness it, John. I will make this weakness my ultimate strength. She was trying to rationalize love, to weaponize desire. But as she kissed him, the coldness of her lips was countered by the urgent, burning need in her touch. The line between forced necessity and genuine, terrifying attraction had blurred, sealing their fates in the heart of the caretaker's terrifying sanctuary. Weeks turned into a cycle of uneasy cohabitation. John and Stella, the reluctant parents, monitored the progress of the hybrid child using the caretaker's organic diagnostic screens. Their relationship had settled into a raw, deeply complex intimacy, a fusion of primal attraction and mutual strategic need. The love was a terrifying weapon, the bond unbreakable. But the caretaker's silence was growing ominous. Their green light constantly pulsed, observing, judging. John, still driven by his need for the truth, began to use his free time to study the caretaker's ancient bioscreens, hacking into the subtle energy patterns of their organic glass walls. One day he deciphered a recurring, massive energy signature emanating from the deepest part of the etheric well, a signature far more powerful than any Vespertine technology. "Stella, look at this," John projected mentally, showing her the cryptic pattern. Stella, who had been resting, immediately sat up, her crimson eyes focusing. "That signature, it's a chronal displacement wave. The Vespertine ascendancy has theories about this. It's the energy needed to bend space-time." "It's not ascendancy tech," John countered. "It's from the caretakers. They've been building it for millennia. They didn't save us to protect the child from a power struggle. They need the child for a cosmic gateway." They confronted the caretaker elder, its organic body suspended in its chamber. "The hybrid child," John demanded, pointing at the diagnostic screen. "Why do you truly need it?" The caretaker entity pulsed, its dry whisper filling their minds. "The child is the key. The Lyra Vespertine and the Homo sapiens share a unique genetic compatibility with this sphere's etheric energy. The hybrid child, combining both, can regulate the chronal wave." The caretaker revealed the horrifying truth. This planet Earth is not a simple sphere. It is a cosmic anchor, a junction point in the spatial fabric. The Vespertine were correct. Their arrival was orchestrated. But not by them. "We, the first life, require the gateway to open. We need to escape." Stella was furious. "Escape what? The ascendancy?" "No, Stella. Escape extinction. The universe is dying slowly. We, the oldest species, perceive the cold death of time. We must travel to a newer, younger dimension to survive. The hybrid child is the perfect, living organic circuit to stabilize the gateway and project us across time and space." John realized the scale of the horror. The caretakers were not benevolent guardians. They were selfish survivalists, preparing to sacrifice the hybrid child and in the process, destroy Earth by destabilizing its cosmic anchor point. The destruction would be absolute. "You'll kill billions. You'll tear this universe apart," John shouted, his voice echoing in the cave. "Your species is already dying, human. The Vespertine are doomed by their own ambition. We are merely accelerating the inevitable. The child's purpose is greater than a single planet. The gateway opens in 72 hours. The new danger was absolute and final." John looked at Stella. All their previous battles, the scourge, the ascendancy, their political lies, were insignificant compared to this cosmic threat. The fear of extinction cemented their bond completely. Stella's cold, ambitious facade dissolved into a terrible focus. She was no longer just a queen, she was a warrior facing a true extinction-level event. "They are using the etheric well's energy," Stella projected, her mind sharp and decisive. "If we can disrupt the etheric regulator, the main power core, we can overload the chronal wave and destroy the gateway before it opens." "We are in the deepest part of their sanctuary," John said, looking around at the organic glass walls. "How do we fight them? They can control this entire structure." Stella stepped close to John, her immense, cold hand cupping his cheek. Her crimson eyes, usually filled with ambition, now held a fierce, protective fire, a genuine emotion born of shared, cosmic terror. "They rely on the complexity of their organic matrix. We use the simplicity of chaos," she whispered. "I know their weakness, John. When my Vespertine ancestors first visited this sphere, they catalogued a way to cause a localized cellular collapse in the caretaker's organic glass." She paused, and the romantic tension was a desperate, burning flame in the face of annihilation. "But the counteragent needs to be delivered through their central nervous system. I cannot do it alone. I need my human partner. Are you ready to kill the supposed saviors of this planet, John? Are you ready to embrace the monster to save the world?" John looked at the woman who had lied, betrayed, and forced his life into this deadly path. He knew he didn't love the queen, but he loved the terrified warrior fighting beside him. "Let's go, Stella. You show me where the regulator is. We'll teach the caretakers what happens when you threaten the last of humanity." The shift in alliances was absolute. John and Stella, the human scavenger and the alien queen, were now co-conspirators against the ancient, terrifying threat of the caretakers. They had 72 hours before the chronal wave peaked. Stella, now driven by a clear existential threat rather than political ambition, had designed the attack. Their target was the etheric regulator, the central organ of the sanctuary, located deep within the well. The caretakers control the organic glass through their neural network, Stella projected, her eyes scanning the blueprints she'd drawn mentally. If we introduce a concentrated burst of unstable, chaotic energy into a primary node, it will cause a localized, cascading cellular collapse, a short circuit in their entire system. What kind of chaotic energy? John asked. Pure, unfiltered human emotion, Stella stated, her voice tight. The Vespertine find it volatile and distracting. But the caretakers, having evolved in sterile isolation, have zero defense against it. It is our greatest weapon, John. The plan hinged on a dangerous, intimate sacrifice. The counteragent, a serum Stella quickly synthesized from the etheric well's minerals, needed to be delivered by John, the human, into a primary neural node. But the path to the regulator was guarded by a wall of high-density organic glass, controllable only by the caretakers' minds. The only way to bypass the wall, Stella explained, pointing to a schematic, is to overload their sensory input. I will use the last of my stored etheric energy to initiate a full-spectrum psychic assault. A raw broadcast of every Vespertine's ambition, lust, and fear. It will shatter their focus. And you? John asked, the horror of her proposition sinking in. That much energy will leave you powerless. You'll be a sitting target for the ascendancy if we fail, or for the caretakers if we succeed. Stella looked at him, and the protective, desperate fire in her eyes was the most real emotion he had ever witnessed from her. The hybrid needs a mother, John, not a queen. I will be your etheric shield. But I will be empty. I need you to promise me, human, that you will not leave me behind. John walked to her, taking her cold, clawed hand. The weight of his promise, to the monster, the betrayer, the mother of his child, was heavier than any metal he'd ever salvaged. I am your only bond, Stella, he vowed. You break the shield and I'll short the system. And I will get us out of here. Together. With 40 hours remaining, they began the assault. John, holding the bioserum and the cloaking resonator, took point. Stella, her massive figure poised in a meditative stance, closed her crimson eyes, drawing upon the deepest reserves of her energy. As they reached the regulator chamber, the organic glass wall shimmered. Caretaker entities, alerted to their movement, began to emerge from the walls, their green lights pulsing angrily. Then Stella unleashed her power. It wasn't a focused beam, it was a storm of pure, sentient information. The psychic blast hit the caretaker's neural network like a supernova. John felt the wave of energy crash over him, a chaotic torrent of alien minds, the cold terror of Vespertine centuries, the hunger of the vampire, the crushing weight of Stella's ambition, all amplified 1,000-fold. The caretakers recoiled, their forms vibrating violently. The organic glass around them cracked. The sheer complexity of Vespertine malice and desire was a sensory overload they couldn't process. Now, John. Go. Stella projected, her telepathy reduced to a thin, cracking thread. Her entire body was losing its luminous color, becoming dull and gray. John darted past the stunned caretakers. The regulator was a shimmering, pulsating crystal the size of a car battery. He plunged the bioserum into the crystal core. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The chaotic human element in the serum reacted with the unstable etheric energy. The crystal screamed, a high-pitched whine that fractured the glass walls. The entire sanctuary began to collapse. The green light of the caretaker's network flickered wildly, then died, replaced by explosions of rock and steam. The chronal wave energy collapsed in on itself. John turned and raced back to Stella. She was barely conscious, a gray husk, her wings limp and useless. He lifted her, the weight immense but manageable in the chaotic gravity. I have you, Stella. We're leaving. As they scrambled towards the collapse-ridden exit tunnel, John glanced back. The caretaker elder, its glass casing shattered, was dissolving into the liquid metal pool. The ancient, silent observers of Earth had been defeated by the combined desperate force of the two species they had tried to manipulate. The gateway was gone. John carried Stella out of the crumbling etheric well sanctuary, his mind a mixture of adrenaline and staggering exhaustion. Stella, depleted of her etheric energy, was a terrifyingly inert weight. Her sapphire skin was dull gray, her eyes mere smoldering embers. They emerged into the snow-swept remnants of the Alps, the air razor-thin. John knew their first priority was finding shelter and immediate sustenance for Stella. Her human blood bond was keeping her alive, but she needed a dedicated energy source to recover. As John dragged Stella's immense, unconscious form down a frozen ridge, a flicker of light caught his eye, not the cold, electric glare of the Ascendancy, but the warm, diffused glow of a human fire. He moved cautiously, the cloaking resonator only partially functional after the etheric overload. He found a small, hidden cave where 3 human survivors, heavily armed with scavenged energy rifles, were sheltering. They were the London Resistance Cell, a decentralized group John had only heard whispers about. The moment they saw Stella, the immense, winged, horned figure, their rifles immediately pointed at John. "Drop her, scavenger. That's a fucking vampire queen." The leader, a scarred woman named Mara, yelled, her finger tight on the trigger. John dropped to his knees, his hands raised, but kept a protective arm around Stella. "Wait, she's compromised. She just saved Earth from something worse than your Vespertine, a chronal gateway that would have ripped the planet apart." "Lies. They all lie," a young man beside Mara spat. "She gave me the Scourge code," John countered desperately, his mind racing. "The data that proves the Ascendancy engineered the plague. I have it in my head. If you kill her, you kill the only chance we have to expose them and negotiate a real future." Mara hesitated, her eyes flickering between John's exhausted desperation and Stella's inert, terrifying form. The mention of the Scourge data was a powerful hook. "The Scourge data?" Mara lowered her rifle slightly. "That's a myth. Prove it, human." John didn't hesitate. He reached out and touched Mara's hand, initiating a shallow mental data link, a trick he'd learned from Stella. He forced her to view the code's raw data and the quick, terrifying memory of Stella's confession about the Ascendancy's role in the genocide. Mara gasped, pulling back her hand, her face pale with horror and shock. "God, it's real. They're all monsters." Mara looked at the unconscious Stella, then back at John. The hatred was still there, but now it was mixed with a cold, strategic calculation, the very pragmatism Stella had taught him. "All right, scavenger. We hold a truce. We need that code, you need to keep your monster alive. We'll stabilize her, but you will give us the Ascendancy's military protocols first. And you will tell us everything about this hybrid you're carrying." John agreed. He had lost the luxury of choice. The Resistance Cell took them in. The irony was profound. The human survivors were now sheltering the Queen who had helped destroy their civilization. They used a crude, high-gain electrical condenser to slowly begin restoring Stella's etheric energy. As Stella slowly began to recover, the full weight of the Act 3, the reckoning descended upon them. The Ascendancy, having lost their orbital citadel and the Purge device, was in chaos, but they were now focusing all remaining resources on a single priority target, Stella and the contaminated human male. They knew John carried the means of their destruction, the Scourge kill code. Mara brought John a terrifying piece of intelligence. The Ascendancy has deployed its final contingency. A mobile fortress, a massive dredge command ship, has entered the atmosphere. Its only mission is to bomb this sector and destroy all biological life, Vespertine, caretaker, and human, to bury the Scourge evidence forever. John looked at Stella, who was now awake, her eyes glowing faintly. The shared glance was a silent acknowledgement. This was the final battle. Stella projected a thought to John, her voice thin but resolute. "They plan to use a sustained plasma saturation bombardment. We have to transmit the kill code through the command ship itself, John. We need to disable their main weapon, or all of Earth is ash." "And you expect the human resistance to help you board a vampire command ship?" John asked, bitterness returning to his voice. Stella looked at him, and for the first time, her expression held a strange mix of regret and fierce need. "I need your human chaos, John. And your human love, the emotional intensity that is the only thing capable of overloading their systems. We are bound human. Now let's win your world back." The mobile fortress, the Ascendancy command ship, hung like a colossal black dagger over the ruined city, its plasma arrays charging for the orbital bombardment. John, Stella, and Mara, the Resistance leader, stood on a high, wind-battered ridge, finalizing the suicidal plan. Stella, her etheric energy partially restored but far from full power, was cold and pragmatic. "The ship's command core is shielded against external sonic or plasma attacks," Stella projected, her crimson eyes fixed on the immense vessel. "The Scourge kill code must be injected directly into their main processing hub, overriding the bombardment sequence." "And how do we get onto a ship crawling with your master hunters?" Mara asked, her energy rifle clutched tightly. The human resistance was skeptical but desperate. "We use the one thing they cannot ignore, me," Stella announced. The plan was a deadly gamble. Stella would be the bait. She would use her last reserves of etheric energy to launch a massive, localized psychic signature, drawing the command ship's attention and the majority of its defenses towards herself on the ridge. Meanwhile, John, cloaked by the resonator and aided by 2 human resistance fighters, would use the diversion to breach the ship's underbelly and reach the command core. Your ship will prioritize capturing you alive to extract the Scourge code, John stated, his voice tight. That buys me the 2 minutes I need. Stella turned to him, her face a mask of cold determination. If I am captured, John, you transmit the code immediately, even if it means my death. The kill code will cause a catastrophic overload, destroying the ship and the evidence. The hybrid cannot survive if the Ascendancy does. Their eyes locked, a final terrifying moment of strategic alignment. The romance was gone, only the fierce, mutual will to survive the extinction remained. The assault began at the pre-dawn twilight. Stella took position at the edge of the ridge, her massive wings catching the wind. The human resistance fighters deployed salvaged anti-grav nets to allow John and his small team to climb the ship's sheer hull. Stella closed her eyes and unleashed the surge. The energy blast was tremendous. A blinding, pulsating wave of Vespertine energy, rage, and ambition slammed into the command ship. Alarms blared across the colossal vessel. The ship's main plasma arrays, instead of firing on the city, swiveled towards Stella. The traitor is isolated. Capture her alive. Secure the bloodline. The Ascendancy's frantic telepathy filled the air. As the master hunters streamed out of the ship's hangar bay, John and his team used the distraction, scaling the hull. They breached a forgotten maintenance duct, and John found himself running through the sterile, cold corridors of the command ship. John's team secured the path, sacrificing themselves to Ascendancy patrols. John reached the command core, a towering chamber filled with humming Vespertine processors. A single figure waited for him. It wasn't a master hunter. It was Kale, Stella's cousin, who had survived the Citadel explosion and was now commanding the final assault. I knew Stella would sacrifice herself for the child. Human, Kale sneered, his golden eyes blazing. She is predictable. But I won't allow your genetic contamination to destroy my species. I will take the child myself. Kale charged, a weapon of pure power. John, unarmed but for the data in his mind, threw his last piece of resistance tech, a plasma grenade, at the ceiling. The resulting electrical disruption momentarily stunned Kale. John seized the opportunity, lunging for the main console. He pressed his hand against the alien processor and focused with every ounce of his will. He channeled the Scourge kill code, a devastating sequence of molecular data designed to turn the Ascendancy's own failsafe against them. As the code transferred, Kale recovered, screaming a Vespertine battle cry. He tackled John, his razor claws tearing John's suit. Your sacrifice is meaningless, human. Kale roared, aiming a killing blow at John's head. But then the command ship screamed. The Scourge code was not just an override, it was a genetic virus. It spread through the ship's processors, causing the Vespertine systems to turn on their own creators. Red warning lights flashed as the ship's core began a catastrophic meltdown. Kale paused, staring at the exploding console, then back at John, his face contorted in disbelief. You destroyed us all. No, John gasped, kicking Kale away. We destroyed your lies. The hybrid will be born free of your ambition. John grabbed a discarded escape pod regulator just as the core went supercritical. He didn't wait to see Kale's end. He hurled himself out of the command core, diving into the void just as the massive ship exploded into a blinding supernova of Vespertine energy and fire. The flash illuminated the pre-dawn sky, a final, terrifying testament to the end of the Ascendancy. John plunged through the atmosphere in the escape pod regulator, watching the Ascendancy command ship dissolve into a distant, beautiful funeral pyre. The command ship was destroyed. The Scourge kill code had succeeded. The Vespertine threat, at least the Ascendancy faction, was neutralized. He landed roughly in the Alps, close to where he had left the human resistance cell. He was bruised, mentally exhausted, and profoundly alone. His first thought was of the creature who had taught him betrayal and survival, Stella. He found Mara and the rest of the resistance surveying the wreckage. Their faces were grim but held a look of awestruck triumph. You did it, John, Mara whispered. The light show, it was incredible. The Vespertine are scrambling. Their hierarchy is broken. Stella, John demanded, cutting straight to the point. Where is she? Did she survive the bait? Mara pointed to a small, isolated cave nestled in the rocks. We found her. She's alive, John. But she's near death. She used her body as a lightning rod for the ship's defense systems when the command ship was exploding. She bought you those final seconds. John raced into the cave. Stella was lying on a makeshift bed, covered in synthetic blankets. She was no longer gray. Her sapphire skin was dull and crisscrossed with severe energy burns. Her massive wings were fused to her back, permanently disabled. The vibrant crimson in her eyes was almost extinguished. John knelt beside her, his hand gently touching her damaged cheek. You should have let me go, human, Stella projected, her voice weak, a mere thrum in his mind. The cost of a queen is less than the cost of a dynasty. I kept my promise, Stella, John said, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of grief and respect. We are bound. You saved the world. Now we save the child. As John examined her, the terrifying realization of the hybrid's imminent birth hit him. Stella was too weak to sustain the delivery, and the intense trauma had accelerated the process. It's coming, John whispered, gripping her hand. It's too early. We need proper medical facilities. No time, Stella projected, her grip tightening on his hand. The child is ready. The bond, it is complete. You need to be strong, John. The birth will be the final act of horror and love. The cave suddenly filled with an intense, localized heat. Stella's body began to glow faintly, her etheric energy trying desperately to fuel the birth, and John knew this was where their intertwined destiny, born of sci-fi terror and forbidden romance, would reach its impossible climax. The birth of the hybrid was a raw, brutal, and utterly alien event. John was guided by Mara and the terrified human resistance, forced to act as the primary medic for the creature that had once hunted them all. The horror was biological. Stella's vespertine anatomy was not designed for a natural birth on this scale. The energy required was immense, and the raw, conflicting genetics of human and vespertine DNA fought for dominance inside her. As the physical agony racked Stella, she initiated a final, desperate mindshare with John, a fusion of consciousness designed to stabilize the child's mind during its traumatic entry into the world. John was instantly submerged in a tempest of emotion. Stella's pain, her primal maternal instinct, and the horrifying residual power of the vespertine lineage. He saw her love, a cold, fierce, possessive, yet undeniable love for the being she had created. The child is fighting John, Stella gasped telepathically. Its human side is pulling for chaos, its vespertine side for cold control. You must give it balance. Give it your hope. John poured every ounce of his humanity into the bond. The memory of his sister Leah, the resilience of the human spirit, the quiet, stubborn hope for survival. He mixed his fragile, warm humanity with her powerful, cold alien energy. Then, with a final, agonizing surge of power, the child was born. It was silent, perfect, and terrifying. The child was humanoid, but its skin shimmered with a faint, iridescent silver hue, a blend of John's warmth and Stella's cold color. It had no horns or wings, but its eyes were not crimson or human. They were a startling, luminous gold. The moment the child breathed, a powerful, silent energy pulse erupted from its small body, momentarily silencing the cave and intensifying the bond between John and Stella to an ultimate, profound level. The child was not just immune, it was a conduit of power. Stella was utterly drained. She looked at the child, a single, final thought projected to John. The dynasty, the power, it is immense. But the bond, it is yours, human. Protect our creation. Her eyes dimmed, and the last flicker of crimson light disappeared. Stella, the cold queen, was still. John, holding his silver-eyed, golden-skinned child, felt a profound, desolate grief, the death of the monster he had feared, fought, and yet deeply loved. The romance was complete, cemented in the tragic sacrifice of the alien queen. The silence was broken by the sound of heavy landing struts outside the cave. Mara and the resistance immediately raised their rifles. They're here, Mara whispered. More Vespertine. Survivors from the outer colonies. They saw the command ship explode. But the figure who entered was not a rogue dredge. It was Kale. He was burned, scarred, and weakened, having escaped the command ship's final moments, but his golden eyes burned with absolute fanaticism. You failed, human, Kale hissed, staring at the child in John's arms. The ascendancy is gone, but the genetic contamination lives. I saw the bond. I felt the raw power of the hybrid. It is too perfect, too dangerous. Kale looked at Stella's lifeless body. The traitor is dead. I will not allow her genetic blasphemy to thrive. I will cleanse this world myself. Kale raised his weapon, a high-yield sonic disruptor. His target was the child. John, fueled by paternal rage and the immense emotional residue of Stella's sacrifice, moved. He placed the child gently in Mara's arms. Get the child out of here. Run. John roared. John tackled Kale, the two of them wrestling in the small cave. Kale was stronger, faster, but John was powered by his pure, chaotic human will. As they fought, John realized Kale's true plan. Kale didn't just want to kill the child. He wanted to seize its power. Kale slammed John against the cave wall, raising his gauntlet for the final blow. The child is mine, human. The power of the ascendancy will be reborn through me. In a flash of instinct, John activated the cloaking resonator in his pocket, throwing it directly at Kale's golden eye. Kale shrieked as the small sphere exploded, emitting a blinding flash of volatile, unstable energy. The blast didn't kill Kale, but it momentarily shattered his vision and his telepathic focus. John seized Kale's gauntlet, turning the massive sonic disruptor against Kale's heavily armored torso. He fired. Kale was hurled backward, his obsidian armor shattering. He hit the stone wall with a sickening crack, his golden eyes losing their fierce light, replaced by the finality of death. The last master hunter of the Ascendancy was defeated. John stood panting, scarred but alive. The final physical threat was gone. He turned to the human resistance. Mara. The child, he whispered. Mara held the silver-eyed child, its golden eyes silently observing the chaos. The caretakers wanted it for a cosmic gateway, Mara said, her voice strained. Kale wanted it for a galactic empire. What do you want, John? You promised to save humanity. John looked at the child, the physical embodiment of his horror and his forbidden love. I want what Stella wanted in the end. Survival. This child is the future. The world slowly began to heal. The Ascendancy was shattered, its remaining dredges disorganized and now fighting among themselves. The caretakers were gone, their threat erased. Earth was free but irreversibly changed. John, now the reluctant leader of the growing human resistance, made a final, decisive move. He led Mara and the resistance to the place where he had crash-landed the escape pod, the Thames Marsh. Here, in the ruins of the Vespertine quarantine zone, they laid Stella to rest. Her immense, scarred body was wrapped in her black cloak, her sacrifice acknowledged not with love, but with the cold, enduring respect a warrior deserves. John stood over her grave, the final words he spoke not a profession of love but a vow. You made me a weapon, Stella. You made me a father. Your lies are dead, but your legacy, our son/daughter, will be raised with human hope, not alien ambition. You won the war, Queen. The hybrid child, whom John named Lyra, after Stella's home world, a nod to their complicated romance, was raised in the heart of the reconstructed human resistance. Lyra's golden eyes and shimmering skin were a constant, terrifying reminder of the war and the monstrous alliance that had saved them. But Lyra was also the most powerful human ever born. The child possessed John's empathy and resilience, along with Stella's formidable telepathic and etheric abilities. The final scene took place 5 years later. Earth had begun its slow, painful reconstruction. John, now the head of the new Global Council, stood on the rebuilt tower, overlooking a new, fragile civilization. Lyra, now a 5-year-old child, walked up to John. The child did not speak with words, but with a clear, resonant thought that echoed only in John's mind. Father. They are coming. John turned, his expression serious. Who, Lyra? The remnants. Lyra shook her silver head, pointing a small, shimmering hand toward the stars. Not Vespertine, Father. Other species. They heard the explosions. They felt the death of the Ascendancy. They are curious about the child of the Cold Queen and the human survivor. The universe is watching us, Father. John placed a steady, loving hand on the child's shoulder, looking up at the cold, indifferent stars. He was no longer a scavenger. He was the protector of a new species, the co-creator of an impossible child, bound eternally to the monster who had betrayed and saved him. The journey of the hybrid was just beginning. The romance was dead, but the horror of the future, a future ruled by the terrifying power of the child he had with the alien vampire, was now a reality. The incredible offer had been fulfilled, and the price was eternal vigilance. The world slowly began its difficult, fragile healing. The Ascendancy was shattered, its remaining dredges disorganized and now fighting among themselves. The caretakers were gone, their threat erased. Earth was free but irreversibly changed. John, now the reluctant leader of the growing human council, made his final dedication. He led Mara and the resistance to the place where he had crash-landed the escape pod, the Thames Marsh. Here, in the ruins of the Vespertine quarantine zone, they laid Stella to rest. Her immense, scarred body was wrapped in her black cloak, her once proud wings now limp and fused by the battle damage. Her sacrifice was acknowledged not with love, but with the cold, enduring respect a warrior deserves. John stood over her grave, the final words he spoke not a profession of affection but a solemn vow. You made me a weapon, Stella. You made me a father. Your lies are dead, but your legacy, our son/daughter, will be raised with human hope, not alien ambition. You won the war, Queen. The hybrid child, whom John named Lyra, a nod to Stella's house and their shared, terrible destiny, was raised in the heart of the reconstructed human resistance. Lyra's golden eyes and shimmering skin were a constant, terrifying reminder of the war and the monstrous alliance that had saved them. But Lyra was also the most powerful human ever born, possessing John's empathy and resilience, along with Stella's formidable telepathic and etheric abilities. The final scene unfolded 5 years later. Earth had begun its slow, painful reconstruction. John, his face now etched with lines of command and sorrow, stood on the rebuilt tower of the Global Council, overlooking a new, fragile civilization. Lyra, now a 5-year-old child, walked up to John. The child did not speak with words, but with a clear, resonant thought that echoed only in John's mind. "Father, I see her." John turned, his expression serious. "Who, Lyra?" Lyra looked at John with her startling, luminous golden eyes, then pointed a small, shimmering hand toward the stars. "Not the ships, father. Mother. She is the stars now. Her cold energy is gone, but the loneliness is still there." John's heart contracted. The cold, ambitious soul of the Vespertine Queen was not resting. It was scattered across the cosmos, a final, chilling testament to her eternal solitude. The romance had ended in a beautiful sacrifice, but the horror of her isolation was eternal. Lyra looked back at John, a small, genuine human smile forming on their silver lips, a smile that held the warmth of John's DNA. "But I am not alone, father. And neither are you." John knelt, wrapping his arms around the child, the impossible future. He was no longer a scavenger. He was the protector of a new species, the co-creator of an impossible life, forever bound to the monster who had betrayed and saved him. The incredible offer had been fulfilled. The price was paid in blood and deception, and the final result was the terrifying, hopeful new dawn of the human Vespertine hybrid. The end.